Welcome to the Walking Dead UK podcast. It's Entertainment Talks podcast for The Walking Dead World Beyond on AMC and Amazon. I'm your host Matthew. Joining me today, my co-host is David. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, thanks.
Good. This is for season 1, episode 5, halfway through the first half of the season. Madman Across the Water. What did you think of this 5th episode?
I enjoyed this episode more than maybe some of the ones I had previously. I think it felt like it was picking up a bit. There was a lot of reasonable bits of action in this one as well. A few more zombies. I like having the kind of group together. There wasn't a huge amount that happened.
No.
But even so, the sort of MacGyvering the boat I thought was quite good fun.
Yeah.
So there was some interesting bits and pieces. You got to see it looks like they're starting to finally abandon this whole idea of trying to get the kids to go back as well.
Yeah,
seems to be sort of disappearing, which I'm quite glad about, because blatantly we all know that that's never going to happen. Right. So I'd rather they just get on board and just carry on moving forwards.
Mm-hmm.
Get across the water, and because we know that they're not going to turn back. Of course they're not, because the entire show is based around them trying to get to this destination to see their father. So the audience knows that that's not going to happen. So don't drag that plot point out. Just have them get on board and carry on going. That's what I say.
Yeah. I really like this episode a lot as well. I don't love it as much as I loved last week's episode, but I still really, really liked it. It's just not quite as strong maybe as last week. I think one of the problems with this episode possibly, I'm not quite sure if it's a pacing thing, but there isn't a ton that particularly happens, and I was kind of waiting for a couple of more sort of set pieces, and I'm not just talking about zombie set pieces, but just more things in the episode. Granted, I feel like they do quite a lot of good character development, namely with Elton and the backstory, and connecting either Iris or Hope, whichever one it is, that she killed his mum, and then she sees that in a notebook, and you've got some development there. Cause that's what I was talking about last week, that she was the one that killed the pregnant woman in the flashback. So I was sure it was her, but I wasn't 100% sure. But they definitely confirmed that in this episode. So that was good. One or two interesting zombie set pieces. I know I'm the one that looks out for that maybe a little bit more so than you, possibly. But I liked the whole wire thing that they do in the episode. I thought that was pretty good. Other than that, there isn't a ton else, but it still did a few good things. Like I said, a few good zombie set pieces, a bit of good character development. I suppose it did move the plot forward a little bit as well, because they finally come to some sort of agreement. So that's the other sort of bit of progress that's made. But it's maybe just missing one or two more things that happen in the episode. It's sort of like they took the same length of episode, which I think it is roughly, they're all about 50 minutes or so, aren't they, these episodes? Yeah. It's sort of like they took the same length of episode, put less things in the episode, but spent more times on, so more on less, basically, in the episode, as opposed to last week where you've got like two different sets of characters in different places, and then all the wolf, and then the walkers, and then what happens with Silas last week. So they're trying to do more with less in the episode, and it was still quite interesting. They just could have possibly been a little bit more, but we will see where they go with things next week. Do you particularly look out for sort of zombie set pieces, that sort of stuff, or are you more about like the characters and the story, I guess?
I am. It's interesting with this show, seeing them deal with zombies. There was a few little bits and pieces, like he had that fishing line that he wrapped around to kind of bar a bunch of them moving forwards. Cool. And I was kind of sat looking at it, going, "Yes, that's a great idea." But whilst they're all leaning up against the line, why aren't you using your stick with a knife on the end of it to take out the ones that are there while they're all stood in a line in one place?
Yeah.
You could literally have, if that had been Daryl, he would have just gone like pop, 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 pop across that line of them and took like a whole bunch of them out in one go.
Yeah.
So there are some like stupid decisions that I made for tension reasons in this. And that's always been an issue with The Walking Dead, in that
all 3 shows,
across the shows you are dealing with a enemy that is incredibly slow moving and aren't really that dangerous unless they can get up close to you,
surround you,
and surround you, and you've got to be kind of overpowered. One-on-one, they're not all that dangerous particularly if you've got a stick with a knife on the end of it, so. That whilst they had a horde of 15 they reckon or so coming towards them, I did look at it and think, why aren't they're there, they're stood in a line, and I know there was a few trying to get round the side, but you could at least have taken a few of them out that were there in one go.
Yeah, it was slightly weird seeing Felix do that as well, because I would argue that he's the most capable in the group.
Exactly. If it'd been one of the kids, I'd understand it. If it was one of the kids that was there, that I get. But
it's sort of like he put the line there and he froze and he wasn't quite sure what to do next. But the answer was perhaps a bit more obvious than what he thought. I don't know. It's a strange little sort of moment, I guess. But we'll talk about it a bit more once we get to it. But nonetheless, in the episode, I still very much enjoyed. I am really seeing this show get completely slated online. From different people, and it's so strange as well, and I get it, it's all about opinion. No one's right or wrong when it comes to opinion, but seeing the amount of praise that Fear's getting and then seeing the amount of slack that Well Beyond is getting is really strange to me, because for those audience members that don't know, I do the podcast on Fear. I've done this week's episode 604 I think it was, for this week. And it's very, very interesting to just see the amount of praise that Fear's getting and the amount of stick that this show's getting, and it's quite strange. I'm still seeing people that are enjoying Well Beyond. There just isn't possibly as many as what I thought. So I don't know. It's still interesting. So I'm really enjoying Fear this season. I know you've had issues with it, so I sort of get that, and I think maybe it's the audience demographic. Because this is clearly aimed at a younger audience, It is a teen drama, So it is a teen drama. It is aimed at a younger audience, and I mean, I know you're not a teen, but you are younger. Young. I'm still apparently young. Yeah.
Yes, certainly younger than me. So, and I think the main show and Fear are aimed at a wider, aren't specifically aimed at a target group. So. I think maybe that's the reason. Like you say, there's no right or wrong opinion to this.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are certain shows which objectively are just good, but I think like Breaking Bad and that sort of thing. But with shows like this, I think some people are going to like it, some people aren't. I'm enjoying Well Beyond, but I honestly, personally, I'm enjoying Fear better. And I'm enjoying the main show more, but then I am not the target demographic for this show particularly. But I can see what they're doing with it, and I can see where they're trying to go with it, and I think it's interesting. But
it's just been interesting to see with because Walking Dead, still very much a sort of different adaptation of the comic books. It's still adapting the comic books, but in a different way. This show's kind of telling a normal story, and then this sort of bizarre format has been chosen for Fear this season. If you want to hear me talk more about it, obviously you can go and listen to that actual podcast, but it's certainly still interesting, which is the main point. So alright, before we go any further, let's get into some housekeeping, and then we will go into the episode. We'll see for that in just a minute.
Hey there, I'm Aaron Holman, host of Eye to Eye, a weekly podcast talk show all about passion.
I have this passion and this fire within me that burns brighter than the fire around me.
Flow.
With performing, there's always a story to tell, whether it's my own or not.
And creativity.
I go, he's more than cute, he's creative.
All with an LGBT twist. Make sure to check out Eye to Eye, that's EYE, number 2, letter I. And rate and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in today.
I'm Christy.
And I'm Jackie.
And we are Killer Fun. We explore the intersection of crime and entertainment every other week.
For as long as people have been communicating, they have been talking about who did what to whom, and is that socially acceptable?
Because the boundaries of society,
crime,
and entertainment have always gone hand in hand.
The more salacious,
or weird,
the better. From books and movies
to television shows and games,
we look at how life and art imitate and inform one another.
And we can't get together and not laugh. So let's face it, there's going to be laughing.
Killer Fun is available anywhere you listen to podcasts, so join us.
If you'd like to get started with a domain name and a website today, just click on the link in the show notes and that will take you over to Koalu to get started. They also have a live support chat system that you can use, which is in the bottom right hand corner. So get started with a new website and domain name today with Koalu. Hey everybody, if you would like to get the ad-free versions of all of our podcasts and support Entertainment Talk along the way, all you need to do is head over to patreon.com/entertainment talk. Sign up either as a creator or as a Patreon, there's no difference there. That's just the option for either becoming a creator now or just staying as a patron for the moment. And then all you need to do is support us at the $1 level tier. That will get you access to all of the ad-free podcasts that we've done in the past and get you access to all the ad-free podcasts in that month as well. So it's a great way to support us on Entertainment Talk and to get rid of the ads and get your ad-free podcasts. You can also become a patron at the $3 level tier. That gets you access to ad-free podcasts and allows you to redeem a review of a TV show or a film of entirely your choice. That's one per month for either a TV show or a film review, which is at the $3 level tier. As always, thank you very much for listening. Back to the show. Alright, recently on Entertainment Talk, Gaming Talk last night, we talked about PlayStation 5 faceplates. There was a company, a third-party company that tried to make faceplates, and Sony, let's say they didn't like it. And we talked about that this week as well, because the week before, for last week's Gaming Talk, we talked about them actually trying to make the faceplates and how kind of cool that is, because the two white pieces of the PlayStation 5, the side bits, they can be taken off. Which is also to disassemble the actual console, but this company was trying to make faceplates for it, and Sony didn't really like it. So they've
why?
It was like it was a trademark. It was like a trademark copyright sort of thing. So we sort of talked about the evil corporate version of Sony coming out in that particular situation. So we talked about that. Activision Blizzard have announced a new BlizzCon for, I think we said it was early next year. So we talked about all their different games and what could potentially be announced there. And we also talked about this month's November's PS Plus and Games with Gold games and the stark difference in quality between the two different selections as well. And of course we talked about what we've been playing as of recently. Actor and Actress Spotlight is back for episode 8 this time, talking about John Boyega, the Star Wars star, of course, played as Finn. Yeah, it was Finn, wasn't it, that he played as in those films. Also talked about Attack the Block and the fact that he's only 2 years older than myself, which is kind of cool as well. We've done 7 episodes for those as well. The previous one, of course, was for the Jim Carrey season for episode 7. But if you want my thoughts on John Boyega, and what he could potentially do in the future, what he's done with the past, and the, how can we put it, the troubled saga with him, Disney and Star Wars, and how that kind of went as well. So kind of talking about that. Analyzing Television episode 3, talking about the fall of Quibi. I won't explain on here what Quibi is because it will take me too long, but I explain it on that podcast and talked about how that's kind of, impacted TV a little bit and what that sort of means for the future of streaming and competition, because there's way too many channels and streaming services, which I also talked about in the previous episode, so it kind of links the two together. But talked about Quibi, why I feel it didn't work, some answers a bit more obvious than others, but kind of analysing, hence it's called Analysing Television, analysing the particular situation and talking about that as well. As I said, Fear the Walking Dead Season 6, Episode 4, we're up to that, so that's going to be this week's episode. Accidentally published this week's Let's Play Sundays on Monday because I went to schedule it on Monday but pressed publish instead of schedule, but nonetheless you can have it a bit early this week. It's not like embargoed or anything. It's just a schedule that I put out. But I went to click on the schedule button and I clicked on publish, so you can have two episodes this week of Let's Play Sundays, as opposed to one, so you can enjoy those as well. They're both for Iron Man VR and Crash Bandicoot 4, so you can go and enjoy those as well. Did a podcast that I don't think anybody could have really thought I would have been doing. Talked about a show called Working Mums. It's available on Netflix in the UK. It airs on CBS in the US, and I think it also is on Netflix in the US. I'm not 100% sure about that, but Netflix and CBS seem to be its homes for it. It's not like one of them Real Housewife shows. It's nothing like that at all. This is a scripted drama with comedic moments, but it's absolutely phenomenal. I'd highly recommend that you go and check it out. It's very short, 4 seasons, about 12 episodes per season, and they're like 20 something minutes per episode. Really enjoyed talking about that. That was great, and it's pretty much a spoiler-free podcast. I talked about what the characters kind of do, but not the outcomes of that as well, so you can go and listen to that if you want to. United cast, Manchester United were beaten 1-0 at home to Arsenal in a very bizarre game of football to watch. That's the first time Arsenal have beaten us at home since 2006, so there's another record that's been broken. We play against Istanbul something or other later. They're a Turkish team in the Champions League, and I'll be back to talk about that later. Crash Bandicoot 4 Let's Play, like I said. Star Trek Discovery is still continuing. Season 3 Episode 3, we're up to that. Season 3 Episode 4 will be out on Thursday/Friday, depending on where you live. And lastly, the other United cast episode. Manchester United did beat Leipzig 5-0 last week in the Champions League. Brilliant game. And Marcus Rashford, who I'm sure is a name that you've all heard in the news, all for good reasons lately, he scored a hat-trick, which was brilliant to watch as well. And that is everything we've been doing on entertainmenttalk.org and on podcast platforms. So, the episode starts on a sign for... What does that name say? Dacritan?
Dacritan, I think.
Like that.
Yes.
Is that a place in the US, I'm guessing?
I
Maybe?
have no idea.
Yeah, it starts off with a sign for whatever that is, seemingly advertising a zoo. Elton looks at it, hearing a voice, empathizing how the force of nature is the most powerful force. They're continuing on their journey. Not a ton to talk about there. I'll continue reading the rest of the cold open. At night, the group gathers around a fire. They mock Huck's relentless efforts to get them to turn back. Elton has been reading a book, For Elton, My Little Explorer. Felix calls him over to look at the map, because of course he does, because that's what Felix has been trying to convince him. He has found an easier route and wants Elton to help convincing everyone to take this route. So talking about the main sort of thing that he's been trying to get him to do. The narrator from Elton's book continues as the group sets again by day. The World Beyond logo is shown on the screen for the cold open as well. So that's that. Yeah, again, Felix trying to convince Elton to get the group to turn back. Ultimately, we know it doesn't happen. It's an interesting little, I guess, start to the episode. But again, already kind of focusing on Elton for the start of the episode with the book, and it's about his mum wrote it and all that sort of stuff, and he doesn't know what happened to his mum. That'll be a very interesting conversation some point later down the line.
Yes, it's going to be interesting to see whether Hope actually admits to it at some point, or because now she knows, as we find out at the end. But
yeah, it seems like, because by the look that she gives the photo later in the episode, she clearly, I don't think that she knew that was Elton's mum. Judging by the way she looked at that photo later, of like, realization of, this woman looked exactly like the woman I killed who was pregnant.
Yeah.
So, she doesn't quite know at this point that it's Elton's mum, but that'll be a very interesting conversation some point later in the season.
Yes.
Do you think that will be before the season finale, or on the season finale, or...
I don't... it's difficult to say. I mean... You're talking about it being, 10 years ago?
Yeah. When
it actually happened. The fact that it was a woman who was pregnant as well kind of adds an extra weight to it, because, she essentially, Hope not only killed his mother, he also killed his unborn sister. So, but it's one of those things that there's no real reason for Hope to actually admit to it, other than unburden herself of the guilt, or unless Elton comes to a point where he thinks maybe he's seen his mother or his mother may still be alive somewhere, which, is a conversation they do have later. But if that becomes an issue that Hope feels like she needs to address, that she knows that the mother is dead.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm very interested to see how they do that, because on the face of it, it does Hope no good other than unburdening herself. It's not going to do Elton any good to know that his friend killed his mother.
Yeah.
And his unborn sister. It's not going to do Hope any good to tell Elton that, other than maybe feeling a bit relieved that it's out in the open. But that's a somewhat selfish thing to do, because it'll make Elton feel awful and will possibly turn him against us. So
yeah,
it's a tricky one. I'll be interested to see whether that reveal comes this season or whether it gets later, held for later on. Or
I think it will be revealed by accident. I don't think that either Hope or Iris, because they both know, I think, don't they? I think that someone will say something by accident at some point, and then there'll be a reveal at a point where, like, walkers or MTs are like on top of them or something, and it will be really maybe inconvenient. That's just my. I'm not telling you that's what's going to happen. That's just my guess. But that would be very sort of Walking Dead-esque, because things like that have sort of happened before as well, where like a character's revealed something at a really inconvenient sort of moment. But I don't see Hope or Iris admitting, like, sitting Elton down and saying, look, this is what happens, because it's such a big weight. And then don't forget, these kids are still very, very young. And it's going to have quite a big emotional and mental impact on both of them. So yeah, I just don't see Hope or Iris sitting down, or both of them sitting down with Elton and saying, look, this is what happened. I just don't really particularly see that.
Yeah.
So
because I don't think it does. I mean, well, Iris doesn't know. I mean, knows that Hope shot somebody, but doesn't know that it was Elton's mother. The only person that knows that it was Elton's mother is Hope, and at the moment, it does her no good to admit to that. Other than, like I say, then maybe relieving some of her own guilt about it. But given the situation, she didn't know. She was probably 6-7 year old kid at the time.
If they're about 16, minus 10, 6.
Because so they were sort of 6 or 7 years old. That's the other interesting thing, is the timeline for this sort of lines up. I'm trying to work out the overall timeline for the main show, because I mean, this is set 10 years after the outbreak, so we know the main show's about 10 years ahead at this point,
at least, yeah,
because they did kind of, it was sort of 5 years plus a sort of 5-year time jump, wasn't there? And then and Fear is behind right now, isn't it? I don't think we've had a time jump.
I don't really know where Fear is in the timeline.
I get the feeling Fear's
it must be close
behind.
Because Morgan and Dwight are over there. And Morgan literally walked from one show to the other.
Yeah, but
somehow.
that happened prior to
the
time jump on the main show. So you're talking. So there could be a sort of 5-year time difference between Fear and the main show at the moment. So I do wonder whether, I mean, this is sort of off topic for this show, but I do wonder when that's going to get resolved. But
yeah, that's how I sort of see that situation going. Huck and Felix hang back as the group's journey continues. Felix is going to try his best with only one of the kids on their side. Huck is starting to see another plan, one of which might mean bringing some of the kids back to Nebraska, and the other continuing with the girls. Elton, with the group, talks about what he suspects happened here. Iris suggests they build their own boats. They make their way into a warehouse, and they're trying to scavenge for supplies, which is a big piece of the episode. And then the next piece is talking about Elton's flashback, so I'll leave that for a minute. The start of the sort of scavenging for the episode, which goes to the main goal, which is to get across the water, which is the name of the episode as well. So starting with that, I did like how in a couple of different scenes in the episode, namely this one as well, how they are combining pretty good character development with Elton and with the flashbacks and the claustrophobia, and how that ties in quite literally to the boat because he's underneath the thing when he's trying to fix it. So that tied in really nicely. And then just them having this general scavenging sort of, I don't know if mission's the right word, sort of task to do. So you're sort of putting two things together, and I thought it was not incredible but fairly effective and everything. And then it's slowly, I mean, it's just a point where they're looking to scavenge their stuff, they go into the warehouse, and then that slowly builds to the walkers finding them at the boat. So I thought it was quite well paced and that sort of stuff. So yeah, what do you think of the start of their scavenging mission and the sort of plan here, or the intended plan?
Yeah, I mean, the intended plan is interesting enough. I mean, it highlights the fact that we've known that these kids are quite bright, and they're sort of aspiring scientists, and that their hopes are sort of a bit of a whiz with technology, and we know that they can kind of build things, and also some of the other characters that can kind of deal with mechanical stuff, and so we know that there is that they have the abilities to be able to do this. So I thought this was quite nice. It would have been a bit weird if they turned up and they just happened to be a boat there. They could all kind of jump in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Plus that would have cut a big chunk out of the episode as well.
Well, yes, it would have got them across the water a lot quicker doing that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Just go across the water and then end the episode. So
yes,
because then you literally wouldn't have had any of the claustrophobia stuff tied in with Elton, and none of that would have happened. So
yeah,
because there would have been no reason for him to go underneath the thing. Speaking of Elton, in the past, Elton's dad explains meteors to him, which are incredibly dangerous and do miss Earth fairly often than what some people might think. His mum then has him feel her pregnant belly, allowing him in a way to meet his little sister, but he'll never, unfortunately, actually meet her, which is a bit sad. He declares he wants to name her Esmeralda. After she leaves, Elton's dad teaches him a bit about painting and stuff, and we will revisit this flashback in a later part of the episode. Yeah, good little start. You immediately see it's obviously the same actress, and well, pretty much dressed up the same way as everything.
Yes.
Good to see his dad. Kind of did wonder a little bit about, because that's an interesting thing with these kids as well, is okay, where are some of their parents? We know that Hope and Iris's dad is it New York again, where they're
but I mean, even in that particular case, Hope and Iris's dad, they're both adopted, aren't they? They're not the dad that's the dad that they're going to chase after is their adopted father, not their biological parents. So and that seems to have happened. So I mean, I'm not sure whether that happened post or after. I don't know, but it's sort of all kind of interesting because we are getting to see a bit more background. And we talked a bit last week about Elton's, how they handled the claustrophobia last week, in that they established that he was claustrophobic and they're expanding on that this week, but the way that they used it last week was very sort of short, in that you saw these little clips of him a quick reveal. And in the same way in the episodes before with what's the other kid's name, Silas, with the Silas episodes, we got a little bit of the fact that he obviously has this violent past, but we didn't get to sort of any huge amount of reveal to that until the next episode. So the way that they're handling those flashbacky bits, rather than kind of dedicating large chunks of episodes to it, it is quite nice the way that they've managed to pepper these sort of through, and they're giving you little bits of information which help in a particular scene like last week, but then we're getting a bit more of it expanded this week as to where the claustrophobia comes from. And it's entirely understandable that he's claustrophobic given what he went through as a child, and I mean, horrifically traumatic experience. So
especially the way he sees his dad later. I mean, wow. So a lot for a little kid to kind of go through. But yeah, I think it's interesting as they continue to go through these characters, especially the younger ones, and with Felix as well. We know what happened to his dad, who was not very nice at all. So yeah, that's quite a good, interesting little point with like finding out sort of what happened to the parents, which ties in directly with some things that are affecting them right now and everything, like with Elton's claustrophobia. So yeah, what do you think of seeing Elton's mum and dad?
Yeah, as it's an interesting little bit of flashback, and you get to see sort of where Elton gets his curiosity from, which is nice. It sort of very much seems to come from his
Right,
father.
the dinosaur stuff.
Yeah, the dinosaur stuff and all that. So and you did the bit later on about with the claw or whatever it is, the spear thing. So yeah, I think that's kind of interesting, and like you say, it also establishes the timeline of when the mother died, because she's clearly wearing the same outfit as she was wearing when we saw Hope kill her. So it clearly happened at the same time when
because
the
all
world
this pretty
went
much happened near enough the same night, didn't it?
Yeah.
Like
what I find really quite interesting is the whole premise of Fear was that the idea was originally that we were going to see the early parts of what happened during the outbreak, and weirdly we're getting more of that, I think, in beyond than we did in Fear. So
because they did it for like the first three
couple
episodes,
of episodes,
of Fear, and then just sort of completely moved away from it. And now, I hadn't really thought about that. We've had like 5 episodes worth of all that sort of backstory. Plus...
and I mean, it's not been solid episodes with you following those characters, but we are getting kind of more textured stuff of different areas of what happened at the time. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I like that. In the present, they found what they need to build the boat and get to work on it. Later, Hope talks about how much easier she thinks things will be when they cross the river. Well, it's never really going to be easy in this world necessarily, but I kind of understand the point. Felix wants to get everyone to turn around still, and Hope overhears him talking to Huck. Hope calls Elton out. Everyone is surprised. Elton tells the truth about agreeing with some of what Felix is saying, although he was still, conflicted. Iris bursts into the argument to tell everyone that they need to work together or they won't make it across the river, which she is correct about as well, because if you start arguing with each other and walkers get on top of you, then you'll get in the situation that you got into later. Interesting little bit of sort of conflict between everybody. Felix tries again to get Elton to help, and Elton's clearly sort of, at this point, I feel like he's conflicted. There was a bit of conflict in him, I feel like, when Felix asked him the first time, and he was saying that he wants to be there with for his friends and help them out and everything, but Felix has just been so convinced about turning around as being the better idea that he's tried to convince him. But sort of turns not back onto Felix, but sort of reveals that he's been the one that's trying to get him to turn around and everything. What do you think of the conflict that happens here?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly makes sense for Felix. I'm still not entirely convinced that Elton would have abandoned the. I don't know. It's does the backstory actually possibly reinforce some of Felix's decisions maybe in this episode? Because it wasn't apparent previously why Felix would agree to go back, because up until this point we've known he's kind of wanted to be an explorer and want to go out and see the world, but given that the horrors he went through as a child, maybe they're leaning into that. Maybe this backstory explains a bit more why he was kind of swayed towards the idea of returning by Felix. Felix's motivations are fairly obvious in that, he's promised to protect the kids, and the easiest way he can do that is going back. Although, as we know, that's not going to happen, and, the campus colony doesn't exist anymore. So, not that they know that. But so that makes sense.
Yeah, that's one of the sad things as well, is Felix wants to go back so badly, but doesn't know that there isn't anything to go back to, which is a bit of a shame. I understand both sides of the intentions. Felix doesn't think these kids are capable, which they're not really. Let's be honest. But then again, it's about finding the sister's dad and that sort of thing. So conflicting sort of goals and everything. But it's just a shame that Felix doesn't know about what's happened. So. Which they surely must find out about at some point. I mean,
you'd think, yeah. I mean, I don't know when, but they've got to find out about it at some point.
Yeah, it isn't necessarily realistic that they'd find out at the moment, because it's not like Elizabeth's gonna radio Felix or something and tell him what's
No.
happened. Like,
By the
there's
way, I killed your entire family and friends, and yeah.
Yeah, and there's nothing else sort of connecting them to that group at the moment. So because they're all basically out on their own and remote and everything. So
Yeah.
Huck and Hope have their own conversation. Huck tries to reason with her, but Hope just wants to know where she stands. Huck admits she is all for bringing you back, but now I don't know. So she's conflicted as well. Going across the country might be the most important thing they'll ever do, and it could make them stronger and better. Huck tells a personal story about almost giving up. Giving up these moments, she says, pushed her to be strong and better. She encourages Hope to allow Felix to learn things like this for himself. So yeah, you see a bit of again, just more kind of conflict between all of them, and Huck sort of talking to, because Huck's probably the least developed character at the moment. We know a bit of backstory for all the other 5 characters, really, because we know about the homophobic stuff with Felix's dad, and we've seen that.
Yeah.
We know about Silas's past. We know about Elton's claustrophobia, and we know about the sisters and the dad, and the fact that one of them killed Elton's mum as well. So Huck is really the only one who hasn't really had a whole lot. Yeah, it's still interesting to try and work out as we go through the show, like who they're doing development for and who they're not, which Huck is the only one they pretty much haven't done so far. And yeah, I'm still kind of wondering, okay, when are they maybe going to kill off one of these characters, possibly? And if that's, I don't know, if they'll do like a typical Walking Dead style where they'd like give Huck a whole episode of backstory just so that you know it and then she dies. I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah. Where do you stand at the moment on like who might die?
It's
a bit difficult, isn't it?
I think it's difficult because they're such a core group, and they literally are the only characters. There is them, Elizabeth, and a bunch of walkers, basically. So I'm not sure that. They might not all make it to the end of the 2 seasons, but I'm not sure we'll necessarily lose one of the main characters in this. I think if you do, it's quite possibly going to be Silas out of that group, because he's got sort of throwing himself in front of, into some sort of danger to let his friends escape, written all over him, I think, at this point. So, because he's always been this sort of outcast, and I think Silas is the type of character that would sacrifice himself to let the others get away. So I think if anybody's going to die out of the group, it's probably going to be Silas, maybe Felix, but I don't think they're likely to kill Felix early on. I think if that's more likely to come later if that happened. So, and you could possibly lose one of the sisters at some point, but again, I think that's going to be quite late on if they do that. Hook, I suspect, is probably the next one up for a backstory. The little bit that they planted here about, her telling that sort of bit of a personal story about giving up, that I think potentially leads into them possibly showing some of that and showing some of her backstory next, because as you say, she's the one person we haven't had any backstory from yet.
Yeah, because they've pretty much done almost episode by episode, taking turns with the characters. Yeah, some of them have had like 2 episodes or whatever. So yeah, Huck is probably the next up. Huck kind of reminds me of Tara before she was developed into a character. Really, because if you look at like Tara before she joined the main group and stuff, and she was with the governor, she was just sort of this little side character, and then they actually gave her some story, and then she got more interesting. But she, personality wise, she's fairly similar to Tara, I think. So Hope moans, so continuing on, Hope moans at Felix and declares it is simply time for her to grow up. Later, the boat isn't working because it's burned out and stuff and needs repairing, because they go to start it and then it just sort of fails, which means that they have to Elton has to go and figure it out later. So anything to say about this little scene, or should I just keep
carry on.
Yep. Later, a storm is coming. They find the animal sanctuary, which was advertised on the signs, so the thing that we saw at the start, and it's nothing more than a small barn. Iris sees a map of the states and on a podium and questions Felix's plan. Felix explains why he feels such a responsibility to look after everyone and how it relates to the uncertainty of their dad right now. Hope just wants honesty. So yeah, they have a little conversation about that as well. I mean, yeah, there is a lot of responsibility leaning on Felix at the moment, which is one of the reasons he's trying to get the group to turn around, because I'm pretty certain that with how we saw in the past with like when Silas was introduced to Felix and some of the other characters as well, and he's pretty much seen them there from the start and kind of watched them grow up and whatever, and does feel probably a bit more of like a brotherly sort of role to them in a way. And now that they're in this situation, and he's just trying to get them to safety. So yeah, I understand Felix's motivation and everything. It's just not necessarily a great idea. So
no, well, I mean, not for the plotting reasons. It isn't. I entirely understand why Felix wants them to turn around. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
He's trying to look after them, and I think there's a conversation a bit later on where he's talking about, he's not only there because he made a promise to their dad. It's also the fact that didn't he say that his boyfriend went off and replaced him? Something about that being the reason that he ended up staying behind, and his boyfriend kind of went off instead, and they were sort of tied in with that as well. So there's sort of various reasons why Felix, has this idea of wanting to turn them around, but so I entirely get why, because it makes perfect sense. Why on earth would you let the kids go wandering literally halfway across the country to try and find their father, who may or may not be in trouble, and they don't know anything really at this point, and it's a very dangerous journey. So you can sort of see Felix's reasoning behind it. So I don't kind of begrudge him that. I understand his need to want to keep him safe, and his plan was to take him down the river, wasn't it? Once they get the boat working, the plan was, rather than go straight across the river, to kind of sail them back down again towards the colony. So I get his entire plan, and but Hope's right. At some point, they've kind of got to grow up, and he needs to get with the program on this. As I said at the start, the problem is that we kind of know that they're not going to end up turning around, because that would be ridiculous. So for the show, so I kind of want them to resolve this and get everybody on board. Felix obviously is going to be begrudgingly on board, and I think they sort of get there towards the end of the episode. But I'm kind of, because they've been talking about the fact that once they cross the river, that's sort of it. That's their last opportunity to turn around. So I think they are committed now to moving forward. So I'm kind of glad that seems to be resolved at this point.
Yeah, I do think that they need to, whether Felix is going to drop this whole idea completely after this episode, which possibly he will, because I think if you do this for like another 2 episodes, and like he goes over to Elton again and again and again and tries to convince him, it's going to possibly get a little bit tiring. And I did start to feel that a little bit in this episode as well, that just him trying to constantly convince these kids to turn back, and then just sort of backing down to the idea. It could, if it did go on a little bit longer, it could potentially get quite tiring, and we do need to sort of move past that, because it's not really going to happen. So
and I as I say, I think he's on board at this point as much as he's going to be, so I think he's probably going to drop it, because they did make a point of saying a couple of times, this is the last opportunity to turn around, because once we're across the river, that's going to be difficult. So I think they've probably dropped it at this point, but so that's good, because I'm getting a bit tired of that bit of the storyline.
In the past, Elton's dad puts him in a box and tells him not to leave. He's going to lock the door from the outside to protect him. He hands him a special rock that will protect anyone who holds it. They hug, and his dad closes him into the box as he leaves. So You've got that going on. Yeah, so this is where his claustrophobia
comes
comes from. What did you think of how? I mean, because we sort of saw a little like a flash of this in the previous episode, because we saw him in the box and the like this piece of wood above him had been kind of moved or whatever, but we had no idea of the context. How do you feel about it now that we've got more context to it?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. As I was saying earlier, I quite like the way that they handled this. They gave you that little bit of information last week, which was all you really needed to sort of understand that, okay, he's got this fear of, he's got this claustrophobia. Now we get to see where it comes from and is entirely justifiable. So, I think this is, it's quite nice. I like the way they're doing this because, as we've said before, when Gimbal gets involved with things, he does have this habit of lingering far too long on backstory and stuff. But I like the way that they're doing this, and they're chopping sort of, there was probably, I don't know, 5-10 minutes of little bits of backstory in this out of a 45-50-minute episode. So it wasn't huge amounts of it, and it's little bits of just texture to the backstory and explains certain things about the characters, and I think it works quite well the way they're handling it in this.
Yeah, I also just think one of the reasons that this Elton whole thing has been handled so well is because you planted the seed last week with the whole locker thing, and then him jumping at that and being nervous around it, and then not only do you fully reveal the backstory and have that tie in to the mother being shot and then the person that shot the mother, and then you've got that tying into the boat, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So there's a lot of different ways that this whole backstory ties together, because it's not all about Elton's claustrophobia. It's about his mum. It's about her being shot and the reveal of that, or the reveal to the other character of that. And it all just ties together pretty well. Plus the fact that when Elton goes to fix this boat, which we'll talk about in a minute, it's pretty much like, okay, he's the one who sort of knows what to do, and he has to face his fears because empties are closing in on them and they haven't got very many options. So it all just ties together really well. So I thought that was great. Very sad for him to go outside, and was his dad's legs were not on his body, were they?
I don't know where they were. Eaten, probably. I suspect.
Got ripped off, and then there's a bullet wound. So I'm assuming he got turned. His legs got ripped off, and then
because certainly somebody had put him down. So there appears to have been soldiers, because we hear one of the soldiers come into the room and go clear. So it sounds like he possibly got eaten, turned, and one of the soldiers shot him. So
because we hear a whole bunch of gunfire and screaming and running and all sorts of other things.
It was quite nice the way they did that, because you didn't need to kind of show it. It was quite nice that they stuck to doing that from Felix's point of view as well. You were in the box with Felix, which was quite a nice way of doing it. Elton, sorry. Yes. You're in the box with Elton, which is quite a nice way of doing it.
Yeah, because even he comes out of the box, the guards aren't there anymore. They've moved on because they think the room's clear, but they haven't checked the box. Sees his dad, what's going on there. He finds this leaflet, he walks off. The story, that piece of the story is kind of done. So, plus, with all the screaming and the gunfire, we know what that's for anyway. We know it's because
exactly.
The outbreak.
You didn't need to see any of that, and it saved them a fortune on budget. So,
there you go, AMC. You saved some money. Continued, Iris feels a tingle and suddenly lightning strikes the barn. Empties come pouring out, and then they run away. Elton and Silas start running with their supplies. The group gets together at the boat. Felix wants to prepare everyone. They frantically get ready. They get the boat ready, but the motor isn't working. Felix runs off to set a trap using the wire. Elton conquers his fears of claustrophobia to try and fix the boat from underneath, so he has to crawl underneath the thing, and then they push the boat into the water and escape. Possibly the best scene in the episode. I mean, the best action scene in the episode, certainly. Because you got Felix, and he's doing all the stuff with the wire. The two sisters step in and kind of help out, which was cool. And then tying back in again to pretty much the main theme of the episode, which is Elton's claustrophobia. He has to go underneath and do that and fix it, and he knows that it's pretty much life or death sort of for them. I mean, they could run away, but they really need this boat to get running. To get on with what they're going to do. So that ties into that as well. Like what they did with the wire. Yes, Felix probably should have stabbed a few of them. It was just, Yeah, it was a little bit strange. He's tying that round the two trees and then just sort of stands there a bit.
Yeah, and just watches them, and you're like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? I mean, I understand that you might get a couple wander around the sides, and maybe that's what he's concerned with. But
that hadn't happened at that point.
That
so,
hadn't happened at that point. You could have easily just kind of gone forward and you know, taken out like 4 or 5 of them in one go on that wire. So, that was stupid of Felix. But and there are little things across the entire Walking Dead when that happens that you do look at it and go, why, you know? And I'd understand if it was the girls that weren't kind of used to this sort of thing, but Felix is supposed to be like a seasoned security officer, so that's kind of annoying. It is nice that the girls seem to jump in at the end and they're getting a little bit more used to the idea of it, which is good. You know, once they've got their kind of first like kill under their belt, they're kind of stepping into it a bit more, which is good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For the featured image for the podcast, I've actually got the picture of Felix standing in front of those walkers with the wire, so you can have a look at that if you want to see that as well. But very, very good. And then they get across the water as well, kind of in the nick of time. They have a lot of trouble pushing this boat out as well.
Yeah, and this was the other thing that sort of Felix seems to be on board at this point, because he helped. You know, they do say we should abandon the boat and run, and Felix comes back with a piece of wood to leverage it off the sand, and that is the point where he does seem like he's all in now, and he's going to be prepared to give up this idea of taking them back, and he's going to have to keep them safe on the road. So it looks like he is actually on board, and that sort of appears to have been the turning point for it. But the sort of tense moment. Didn't know exactly what was going to happen there, but we assumed some of them were going to get away, but not necessarily all of them. But they did, which is good.
Yep. At night, Felix and Hope seem to be getting along better. Hope says he says he's taking care of them for more reasons than the promise he made to their dad. Again, I think it's a responsibility, sort of brotherly thing towards the group. Huck is going to go ahead of the group for 2 days to see what's ahead. We'll talk about that in a second. Elton sits alone and remembers his family and being rescued after they died, and he adds some notes to the book as well. And I believe this is the point where, is it Hope? I'm still getting the sisters mixed up.
Yes,
Hope's the rebellious one, isn't she? The one that shot the mum. Looks at this photo in the book. I'm pretty sure it's at this point, and has the realization of that it's
it's
Elton's
the woman that she killed.
Yeah, and has a bit of a reaction to it. So it'll be very interesting to see how she starts to act around Elton now for certain situations, and because this book is probably going to be quite a long-term thing for Elton. Like, every time he goes to reference it or write in it and then the photo pops up, is that going to have an effect on her? I mean, it probably will, and it'll be very interesting to see how that develops, because that's a new sort of piece to everything that's kind of going on with them too. So, Huck going ahead for 2 days. What did you make of that?
There appeared to be some sort of ulterior motive to that. That's certainly the impression I got. With
Solo scouting
she
ahead
said,
at night.
because she said something about I suggest we divide and conquer to Felix, and then announces that she's going off ahead. So I'm a little confused. I don't know whether she knows more about what's on this side than maybe she's letting on, and maybe she's going to try and meet somebody, or I'm not sure. But there seemed to be some sort of ulterior motive to that.
Do you think Felix knows what she's doing?
Well, yes, I suspect he does. But Huck seemed to have been on board with the girls at this point.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm a little confused as to exactly what she's doing there, but I don't think it's as straightforward as, she's just going to go and scout around. I think she knows more about this side of the river than she's letting on.
Yeah. It's also just very, very risky, in this world at night, going off on your own. Those things don't really work out very well for some people. So,
no.
But it is quite interesting because, as we mentioned a bit earlier, Huck is the one who's least developed. This could be a good chance for her to go off on her own. We maybe see a bit of her on her own, not as a bottle episode, but as a part of the next episode, and then maybe we finally get a bit of backstory that sort of ties in with that. That could work potentially quite well. You don't need to have Huck leave the group in order for that to happen, because that hasn't happened to any of the other characters yet, but you know what I mean? It could be a good way to sort of tell an individual story with her, but as a connected episode to the group.
Her sort of leaving the group does kind of again signal towards them maybe doing a bit more backstory with her, and as we said, she's the one person that hasn't had a backstory yet. So I think that's probably what's coming up. Although, like you say, she doesn't need to leave the group necessarily to do that, but there may be something in her past that works for her being on her own, stuck somewhere. She was a sniper in the Marines, I think, according to the little kind of bit of character backstory I've got here. So, whether that's going to come up in an event from her Marines days.
You can scout with a sniper.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you know, and the fact that she's a sniper, and given that, it sort of makes sense that she'd be comfortable enough to go off on her own, you know, because they tend to work on their own snipers. So, but we'll see where that goes next week.
That could be fun, picking off a couple of walkers with a sniper. If that situation happens, we don't know. But what do you make of the photo in the book reveal?
Well, it's pretty much what we said earlier. You know, now that's definitely confirmed. I don't see it doing Hope any good revealing that to Elton. I mean, it will have to come out at some point for plot reasons, but I don't see. I don't know when that would happen. It could be something that happens this season. It could be something that happens later on when they need to throw in a bit of conflict. But I can't see what good it would do. Certainly, Elton knowing that information. And other than the guilt that Hope feels about it, and if she starts acting weird towards Elton about it, then I don't know. But we'll have to see what they actually do with it. But I can't see it doing anybody any good knowing that information now.
Yeah, we still have 5 episodes left of the season, so. And then the episode ends with someone with a stick approaching the group, but it's not revealed who it is, in classic cliffhanger television style. Definitely not the worst cliffhanger the show's done. I think we know which one I'm referring to. But an interesting little cliffhanger here. Maybe Huck came back really early. Maybe it's Heath. I don't know. He's got to be somewhere. I mean, he is somewhere. So
yes. Wasn't there a bit that reckoned that I read somewhere
he's maybe
that
with the group or something.
Heath is maybe with one of the groups. So it would tie in if it was somebody like Heath. But I mean, you know, clearly it's a different character. I mean, carrying a stick. I mean, it could be Morgan, but you know, I think that's unlikely, given that you've then got to tie that into the Fear show somehow. And
Morgan's just going to run between all 3 shows now.
Yeah, and as we've established, there is probably a 5-year difference between the 2 shows. So
possibly.
I mean, it's not impossible, but I don't know. It seems unlikely to me.
Could you tell if this stick was one of those knife things or just a stick?
I couldn't know. Not without looking at it again.
I don't think it was straight enough. Because the little black pole thing that they've got with the stick is quite straight, isn't it? And the thing that this person's holding looked a lot more bent. So I don't think it's that. Not that has any indication as to who it is. It's just an interesting point, I suppose. So I guess we'll find out who that is next week. We've speculated a little bit on who it is, but I don't think we've really got any idea. It's probably a new character that we haven't seen yet. So
probably.
Yeah, or maybe it's that mysterious ninja person.
Maybe it is. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Alright, that's the end of the episode. We'll see next week who it is. Well, hopefully next week we'll see who it is. Sometimes they don't reveal those things. But I'm pretty sure that we will find out. We'll see where Huck goes off to, what she's got planned, and if we get a bit backstory. But let us know your thoughts, feelings, questions, comments, or maybe concerns about any of the Walking Dead shows, or really anything related to Entertainment Talk. Matthew at entertainmenttalk.org, Twitter eTalkUK, there's a contact page and information in your show notes. Gareth, I know you have both talked about Iris and Hope being the leaders, but I actually think Felix is. He is the oldest and the most experienced adult of the group. Yeah, I think we can definitely agree. I mean, the leader in terms of the plot is probably the sisters, because those are the two... Those are sort of the two main characters, but the leader of the group is probably Felix.
Well, I'm not convinced by that. I think it's the sisters driving it. I mean, if Felix was the leader of the group, they'd all be heading home.
Well, maybe leader is the wrong word to choose. He's sort of...
He's certainly... he's the adult of the
group.
Yeah, he's the adult. Felix and Hook particularly are the adults of the group. Felix is certainly trying to fill that leadership role. Mm-hmm. But it's the girls that are making the decisions. It's the kids that are the ones that are determined to get into this particular way. So it's them that are actually driving the direction that they're going in. Yeah, I mean, Felix is the person that's most experienced he's
taking care of the group.
Yeah, he's taking care of the group, but I wouldn't have said he's the leader of it at all. No. It's the girls that are leading it. It's Iris and Hope, far more than anybody else, I think.
Yeah. Bernard says, I have to agree with the hate for the show. The only reason I'm still watching is for the CRM, which is the main military group, which ties everything together. And we have seen very little. I'm on my phone for almost the rest of the episode, which is not a very good sign when you're watching a TV show. Fair enough if it's something like... If you're watching something like Travels with his father, the Jack Whitehall show, or something like World According to Jeff Goldblum, like those sort of shows, you can maybe be on your phone a little bit because you don't need to pay 100% attention. But if you're watching something like this that's more, got a plot and a more intricate story in that, and you're on your phone, then it means that the show isn't getting your attention, which is not a very good sign. So yeah, it's unfortunate that you feel that way. I do quite massively disagree. But it's very interesting and kind of funny in certain ways. Just the massive... I don't know how much hate you've seen like online for the show, or what sort of reception.
Not a lot, to be honest, but I haven't particularly been going looking to be fair. So
I'm in a few like Walking Dead Facebook groups. To put the podcast in and that sort of thing. So yeah, I've seen a fair bit of hate. I've seen very little sort of positivity around it. And it's funny because a lot of people are like, oh, this is terrible, get it cancelled. It's like, well, it's only got one more season, so...
Yeah, I mean, they're never going to do stupid saying get it cancelled, because they have specifically said it's going to run for 2 seasons. And the thing with all the Walking Dead stuff is they are, at this point, they are designed to fill certain holes to... build this universe, so it's never going to be cancelled. I don't think it's gonna. It was ordered for 2 seasons. It's going to run for 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. Its viewing figures, to be fair, have been relatively steady. I mean, the US viewing figures, it did 1.6, and bear in mind that this won't include the early releases on the AMC Premium, AMC Plus app, whatever it's called these days.
Which is on Thursdays, I think.
Yeah, so the live viewing figures, it started off at 1.6 and then was sort of 1.4, 1.04, 1.04, 1.02. The last episode was like 0.74, so it dropped a bit for the last episode for the live viewing figures. But that's fine for AMC for this sort of show. I don't think they're going to be overly concerned about that.
So that's the AMC, not the AMC Plus numbers, isn't it?
That's just the straight AMC numbers, because they won't release the streaming numbers. Mm-hmm. So,
how do you feel about that with the episode? Because I think it's Thursdays, because it gets to like Friday morning, and I see people talking about, like, publicly talking about like the newest, the new episodes of Fear and for World Beyond. It's kind of, I don't know, it's a bit strange because AMC's a cable channel, isn't it, or whatever?
Yeah.
And then if you pay, I think it's like an extra £5 a month, you get the episode a lot, like 3 days earlier. How do you think of that idea?
Well, because AMC's a premium cable channel, but I think it comes with a number of cable packages.
Okay.
The app, I think, is separate thing. So they're trying to drive audience to the app, and one of the ways that they're doing that is by releasing episodes earlier on there for their shows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a marketing ploy on their behalf.
Yeah.
And I mean, I get it. It makes perfect sense for AMC. It makes perfect sense to do that. You know, it's a way of getting people to subscribe to their app and pay the extra money for it.
Another subscription service.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether you can just pay for the app and not get the channel. Possibly, maybe that's the reason for doing it. I don't know, but
yeah. Lastly, Lawrence says, "What's with the imbalanced story for Elizabeth and the CRM? We have not seen a whole lot of her, and that has been slow." Yeah, it is interesting that. How many scenes have we had with Elizabeth? You had the pilot, where she was obviously in a good chunk of that. You had the end scene with the other soldier who didn't want to be compliant. That was in episode 3? 2? I think it was in episode
3.
And then
3.
you had...
Yes, 3.
Yeah, there's like flashback stuff. You haven't really had much else, and we've had 5 episodes. I don't know, how do you feel about how they've been sort of implementing that into the story?
I mean, I would like to see more of it, but I'm not at all surprised, because it's not her story. It's the story of the kids and them exploring this wider world. She is a part of that, but I think we're probably going to see more of that character moving forward. We might see more of her towards the end of this season, and I think you're going to see more of her in the next season as well, as they get closer and closer to where the father is being held. So yes, I think you are going to see more of that, and I understand people wanting to see it, but I think it's going to be fairly sporadic, because it's not their story. It's not the story of the CRM. It's the story of these kids at the moment. But Julia Ormond taking on that role makes me think that they are probably going to use that character in a wider context in other shows, or she's going to pop up somewhere else later on. So I don't think it's just going to be, she's quite a big name to put into a role like that and only use her a little bit. I think it's somebody that's going to have a wider role, I think, outside of Beyond.
I wonder if we might have a CRM episode at some
Possibly.
point. Yeah.
Possibly. Later on. Once we've established a bit more about exactly what they were doing, because we've seen little bits and pieces of CRM, like the place where they were testing, and we know that one of the people that worked with the father was testing on a scientist that had died. So we've seen little bits and pieces of it, not particularly directly about the CRM, but some of the scientific side of the CRM. So we are getting more bits and pieces of it, but you were never going to have like huge amounts of it unless they do get to a point where the kids have met one CRM person, and there needs to be a big reveal of whatever that backstory is, and maybe we'll get that at some point.
Yeah, I'm guessing that Elizabeth would be in the Rick films as well.
Possibly.
Possibly.
I would imagine so. Yeah, quite possibly. Maybe that's what they're using it for.
The first of those Rick films needs to establish where he is, what he remembers, and whatever. But we're supposed to have a trilogy, so I mean, because the franchise is clearly going in a direction where they're going to tie a lot more into the CRM. So I would imagine that where Rick has gone, which is in one of the helicopters, is probably going to tie into that quite heavily. So whenever we see that film in a few years' time. And that's the end of our podcast today. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for all the emails and feedback and everything that we've got. Things are going pretty well with the podcast so far, so thank you all very much for that. In the meantime, you can find everything else that we do on entertainmenttalk.org, TV, video games, films, and Manchester United podcast. Remember that we play against Istanbul later on today. And let's hope that we do something. We seem to play very well in the Champions League, but not very well in the Premier League. So it's an interesting situation, certainly. But look out for all that on entertainmenttalk.org. If you'd like to support the podcast and Entertainment Talk, if you like what you've heard and you want to support it and hear more and get more involved, that would be great. There's a few different options for you. Patreon, you can have a look on there for the $1 and $3 level tiers for instant ad-free podcast options and review options. Amazon affiliate link if you're buying those Christmas presents or treating yourself, or both, whatever the occasion may be. We can get a small cut of what you spend, but it won't cost you extra. iTunes feeds and podcast services, please look for Entertainment Talk on there. Just search for us on your favourite podcast platform, and if we're not on your favourite podcast platform, please let us know, so that we can look into that as well. Just search for Entertainment Talk. You can also search for Geektown on podcast services and iTunes. That's for David's Geektown podcast, of course, for the TV and film news, the up-to-date, reliable TV and film news. Geektown Radio is on Tuesdays. This week's episode is available to be listened to as well, so you can go and check that out after you've finished this one. Geektown.co.uk for all the news as well, and Geektown Radio on iTunes. Just look out for that. Bex is streaming daily at the moment over on Twitch. If you search for Trista Bytes, that's Trista, Bytes. Go and follow her, subscribe to her as well. And also, I've been doing a few more Twitch streams lately. I'm playing Pro Evolution Soccer, trying to win a few different things. I'm going to be starting the Master League, which is the different name for the starting a season on Pro Evolution Soccer. So my link for Twitch is also in the description for this as well, so you can get over there and check that out. That is with a microphone and with a face camera, so you can see and hear me while I try and score or try to not let a goal in. So check that out as well if you want to. So that's that for Twitch. Word of mouth, you can simply tell people that you know about Entertainment Talk, Geektown and Trista Bytes. Social media, you can do the same thing, but with Facebook, Twitter and different Facebook groups. And sometimes with double episodes, you can also check out Let's Play Sundays as well. So check those out on Sundays. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.